Okay, so we're going to have another sculpture forum. We have been to see an exhibition at the New York Academy of work by Robert Taplin. And very grateful to be joined by my usual compatriots, Jock Ireland, Brandt Junceau, and this is being recorded and will be edited by Nicole Oliviera. Thank you so much, Nicole, for doing this.
Of course.
Um,
All right.
and we are ready to go. Looking at a video of the exhibition, um, which is work from three series of works that Taplin has made over a significant period of time, beginning with some beaten steel pieces, forged steel, and then moving into works made in, I guess, resin of some kind. It's a fascinating, entertaining exhibition. Not the kind of things that generally interest me. Very figurative, narrative, and I'm going to leave it there and invite someone else to get stuck in. Jock, help.
Well, I enjoyed it. There are just a whole lot of things to think about and talk about. He's he really likes making sculpture, and that enthusiasm for sculpture I found exciting. I was particularly excited by the earliest series, the forged metal pieces. He seemed there to be thinking as he worked, and the sort of, I don't know, his head and his hands weren't separated. And that was, as I say, exciting to me. Bill Tucker, in the course of our email exchanges, he brought up a connection between Taplin's metal pieces and Julio Gonzalez's Montserrat, that figure, famous figure. And that was interesting to me, but I sort of resist that connection, but it brings out a difference between the Montserrat piece is closed. It's a sort of complete figure. Bob or Taplin's pieces are not closed. They're kind of flayed figures. And that sort of ripped openness is, well, it's startling and disturbing for one thing. And, but it's interesting to me as sort of contemporary sculpture. And it makes me think of Lydia Gladkova's work, and Tony Smart in England. They're sort of just working with the skin, and that's daring and sort of disturbing. I could go on, but Brandt, how about you check in?
Jock, I don't know what you mean by flayed.
Just skin ripped off. You know, they're.
You're referring to the forged pieces?
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
And I think you're drawing attention to the fact that the forms are not enclosed.
Yeah,
That in the sheet metal has been heated, beaten, formed, but not enclosed. That if you look at the backs of the figures, you can see openings in the where the metal has not been joined together, so that you can see, as it were, inside the metal forms. I guess it would have been fairly easy to enclose them, and um, Bob Taplin, didn't do that, so we could kind of have a sense of a much more open sense of how they were made. I did not. It wasn't clear to me to what extent that was a um, uh, in some way a very important point of the works, or whether that was to some extent a kind of practical consideration, that to enclose them would have somehow been I guess in a way tidying them up and making them more academic. It was nice. It was nice that they were left open and you could see very clearly. And I agree with you, Jock, about the hand and the head working together in those forged pieces. There's a sense of him, being in tremendous kind of skill and control, and yet just barely in control. I found that very exciting, that sense of really pushing the limit of what he could do in those pieces. And I think you're implying, but correct me if I'm wrong, that in the later works, the other series of works in various resins, that the head and the hand were not so intimately bound together. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's my take on things.
Okay. Okay.
The middle series, the planets, are they were interesting to me. I liked the pairing of a opaque figure with a translucent figure, and that the translucent gave me sort of access to an inside that I found appealing. And it also, the modeling in those figures in the planet series is the head and the hand are close, and I kept thinking about this guy Harvey Citron, who used to teach at the New York Academy. Apparently was a very good teacher, and his work is sort of dismissed as academic, but it's not. It's has a toughness and a maleness that that Bob seems to share, and that it's exciting to me. The most recent Punch series is the head is working overtime for me.
Brandt.
The head versus the hand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I feel that for me the physical style of pieces is kind of keeps me at a distance. The visual style reminds me of kind of like the line drawing in a Michelin guide or a dictionary. they seem to kind of name a subject that they don't but that they don't actually define or kind of occupy. I feel like the feelings that go with the situations don't come out in the sculpture. I mean, they're very peculiar, often sadistic subjects. You have one character, doing kind of humiliating harm to another, but they're kind of they're affectless, nevertheless, no matter how kind of extreme and peculiar the situation.
This is the Punch from Punch and Judy series that you're referring to here, Brandt.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at them, I don't really think of Punch and Judy. I think more of Punchinello, and I'm reminded of his name's escaping me. The Venetian painter.
Tiepolo.
Tiepolo. Yeah, Tiepolo's Commedia dell'arte subjects.
Yeah, I mean, so am I understanding you correctly that somehow or other you're saying that in that series the content of the work and the subject matter were somehow divorced?
Yeah, I don't know what's at stake. And that sort of depictive, that kind of illustrative style, which clearly is really deliberate and uniform, persistent, committed to. I'm not sure what it's getting him. I mean, it gives him certain distance from the subject himself, but then when it comes to the viewer, I mean, at what point are they engaged?
Yeah, it seemed to me that that series, which are the later series, in some way offered themselves as very public kind of works. I mean that in the sense that there's a lot to be said about them.
Mm-hmm.
So they contain a lot of information. But I think I agree with you that while they're very rich in terms of what you can derive from them in terms of ideas and information. At the same time, the experience of being in their presence is quite neutral. It didn't have any emotional kind of weight for me. Just looking at them, being in their presence.
And I mean, it may be that I just have not, approached them from, an angle that I'm being invited to, and therefore I'm missing something.
That may be my problem too. I may just not have. I don't know.
It's a funny
sufficient grounding in the history and the material that is being engaged. But yeah, I mean, and there were some smaller colored pieces that I found, more intriguing, but still with the same kind of sense that I was distanced from them.
When I see any of the pieces from a bit of distance, and they're kind of like pure situation, pure subject, they're more engaging than when I'm closer. It feels almost like they become more remote as I get closer. They become less informative. The sort of problem that they depict is clear at a distance, And then on the near approach, I feel held off, from
Yeah, so there's a sense in which the kind of image offered uh, um, carries some kind of impact, but loses that impact when you become more closely scrutinizing it. Is that?
Yeah, somehow the construction of the piece doesn't follow up on the
Yeah, which
on
is
what I see at a distance.
yeah, interesting. I mean, it's a reverse, I think, in the case of the forged steel pieces,
Mm-hmm.
where the more closer you get to them, as it were, within reach, so you could be in the place of the maker, then they continue, they sustained interest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a curious kind of phenomenon, I think. The way in which something can seem to be uh, um, potentially uh, of interest, and then you're drawn to it, and the interest somehow or other gets dissipated, isn't sustained. And partly I think in my case, at least, because I began to just be knocked out by the technical skill.
Mm-hmm. And they're all modeled freehand, right? And cast resin.
Yeah, I don't know, but my response to that is, I'm guessing, and I have no idea really, but I'm guessing he made them out of plastiline initially, and then they were cast, and well, there's a big difference between plastiline and clay. And clay is sort of alive, and plastiline is just dead. But Bruce Gagne has been able to use plastiline in a way that brings it to life. But Bob, these, I think that, sort of one of the first big problems with these is that the spirit of fabrication rather than modeling, and particularly modeling in clay. But at the heart of all of these, all of the work in the show, it is a kind of you can think of Tiepolo as this sort of frivolous 18th century painter, both the Gambitista and Domenico, his son. But they're late 18th century, and they sort of overlap with Goya. And that sort of engagement with the disaster of modernity is um, Taplin's theme, it seems, throughout these series, and he makes it or tries to make it personal, and by pushing things to extremes, or I see a flayed figures and in the metal pieces, and the stories and whatnot. Just the floating the planets into space, outer space, is an extreme thing, and there is this sense of self-portrait in the planets that I think the Punchinello figure is a kind of stand-in for Taplin himself, and that
Huh.
uh,
Hmm.
that sort of narrative is interesting to me.
Mhm.
And Brandt, you're grunting there. Because it made me think of your talk about Rodin and Rodin bringing his life into his drawings, and the drawings being this extreme situations. They're not flayed figures. There's this weird, or intense erotic uh, dimension to the drawings. But in addition to that erotic charge, there's also a heavy weight of shame uh, and sort of confession
In Bob's work.
in Rodin and in Bob, and in that connection between Rodin and in your talk at the end you brought in Rodin and his life.
Mhm.
And
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
and it's that sort of, and I don't really know, but I think of you as a guy who likes the confessional poetry, the Lowell and Berriman.
Yeah, that's true.
And that Lowell and Berriman are pretty close to us,
Mhm.
and close to Taplin. And I'm I don't know, this theme of uh, confessional, that way of dealing with
Mhm.
the world we live in, the world without a God and so on, is something that Taplin takes very seriously, and I'm excited by his engagement with it.
Mhm. It's interesting to me that you identify the Punch character with the artist, because I hadn't sensed that he had chosen a side somewhere in there. I didn't identify the characters with the artist.
Yeah, well, it's not a sort of one-to-one connection, but it
Mhm.
introduces a level of irony that is just very modern.
Mhm. See, for me, I didn't sense irony, but I know that the artist doesn't identify with the cruelty in the in his subjects. So I'm still at sixes and sevens as to how and how he's emotionally and kind of morally linked to the physical existence of his work.
Well, it's or I'm suggesting that it's in the same
Everyone,
way as Rodin was connected to those drawings.
I think in the abstract that might be true, but specifically, I think that Bob has made very specific decisions that he sticks with to create some distance between the kind of the moral problems of in the subject and himself. I think that style is really carefully modulated to that end, and it's brought out by the kind of 180-degree difference in style from the resin pieces to the forged pieces.
Yeah, I think
You really feel him, you watch him thinking out loud.
yeah, and in the forged pieces, what there's evidence of struggle. There's evidence of a real kind of physical engagement with the material, which is both a kind of battle. and you can get in touch there with potential for some kind of cruelty, because the metal is beaten, hammered, and worked, and you feel it. In the later Punch series, you're referring to cruelty, but it's a kind of narrative cruelty. It's not physically accessible, except through the story that you find you can make up. I mean, so I mean, I think that it's as if, well, on the one hand, you reference, Jock, the idea that all of this work maybe is in some way self-portrait, as all of our work always is. But here it's rather critical. But the self, Bob Taplin's self, is increasingly distant, it feels to me, from the physical object that emerges. So that he is present as much more as an idea rather than as evidence through his handling of the material.
Yeah. He's gone from working from the inside out to working from the outside in, and that move is very dangerous. The later figures are kind of too much poussin, too much order, and not enough, really. And the earlier work is really disturbing, at least to me. And I don't know, well, you could say he indulged that, or but
yeah, no, they just feel very, very different experientially. I mean, as to be in their presence, it's a very different kind of engagement, and the later works are thought provoking, but that's it. I mean, they provoke a kind of engagement that is, as you engage with it, you're removed more and more from the physical object. That their engagement takes you away from the physical object rather than more deeply into it, which I think is in some ways the reverse with the forged steel pieces, where your engagement somehow becomes more deeply entwined with the physical object, rather than with some idea about it. Is that fair? Yes, that's fair. I mean, at the same time, they are fascinating things and problematic in all kinds of, I think, good ways, and challenging one's ideas about what it is that we're, as sculptors, attempting to do.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see a rehearsal of a new dance by Mark Morris. The dance is called Moon, and it's about outer space. And I kept thinking of Bob's planets, and sort of how much happier the Mark Morris dance is than Bob's planets, but they're connected. And it's a daring thing to throw a sculpture up into outer, or throw sculptures sort of into outer space. And exactly what outer space is and just that idea of space in the planets and in the forged works is strange, is original, and the space in the later work is more conventional. Though he tries things with scale and whatnot, but
Yeah,
not
not sorry, Jock.
just not with the impact of the earlier series.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by outer space. I mean, they are in our space. They are in our. They're hung from above, but they are physically in the same space we're in.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they're, one is translucent, the other is opaque. Where are they really?
Well, I think I knew where they were.
Yeah, you could reach out and touch them, but space is a mysterious thing, or at least I'm, having seen this dance, I'm just thinking about space, and the dancers could 5 feet away from me, but they were in a different world.
And you sense that with these Planet series, the works
Yeah.
that we saw, that they're in some way for you distanced in a way that makes you feel they're not in your space anymore.
Well, yeah, they're remote, but they're, the sort of disturbing dimension and the sense in which the figures sort of look like Bob, they're also intensely present.
I mean,
I think you've pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's an interesting progression, I think, from a kind of very physical involvement to a much more conceptual kind of engagement. Moving from a kind of hands-on struggle with material to an increasingly kind of I hate to say this, but kind of illustration of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too cruel?
It occurred to me that I really missed the fact that these things may be intended and shaped toward public space. And
Yeah, that's my sense as well. That the work becomes less and less intimate and more of available to a kind of public. So it's more and more about kind of narrative information than about an immediate and direct engagement with material in order to discover something, to find something, so that it almost feels as if the subject matter and the content have become divorced, separated to too great a degree. I may be missing something, but that was my sense of feeling more and more. I mean, it's just and I guess we share this sense of wanting to feel, in some way, the artist is that we're with the artist in looking at the work, engaging with the work. We can kind of sense the presence of the maker, rather than the ideas of the maker. I don't know. Anyway, I think we have covered it. Last words.
No, I don't have any special words.
Okay.
It occurs to me now that kind of put together what I was seeing, thinking, feeling, and what the artist had chosen to give and not give. That that maybe what he's saying to me is that he finds contemporary events repulsive and unbearable, and they're not funny.
Can you say a little bit more, Brandt?
Well, it's sort of like men in dark times kind of perspective, that what goes on around us is really too awful to think about and to bear feeling, and one absents oneself, and even attempts at humor fail to create enough distance, and even the best attempts to kind of satirize, boulderize, burlesque situations that we're implicated in, by, like, because a lot of the subject matter is kind of Abu Ghraib, right? And you really don't want to have anything to do with it, but we're paying our taxes and making it go on, blindly and catatonically. So this sort of occurs to me that this work kind of rubs the public nose in that.
Yeah, but it's not just rubbing rubbing the public's nose in it. He tries to make art, and he there's just a whole lot of determination of I damn the torpedoes, I'm going to head and making sculpture today. It's not he hasn't been defeated. I mean, he's not kidding himself about the modern world, but he hasn't been defeated.
Yeah, I can hear what you're both saying, and I think it's absolutely interesting and highly relevant. I mean, I think Brandt, if I understood you, you're saying, I can put it in other words, that the events in the world are just too horrible.
Yeah.
The inhumanity that we can witness is too much to bear, and so the increasing distancing that one senses in the progression of the work from the forged steel pieces to the more recent work is deliberate and is saying, this is the state of affairs, and I can't bear it.
Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it.
Well, I can understand that, and I can accept it, but it didn't strike me that way when I was in there with the work. It didn't strike me that I was that I was being shown something and kept at a safe distance from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't feel that. I mean, intellectually, I can agree with that concept, what's going on, but I didn't experience it that way in the gallery. But maybe that's my insensitivity, perhaps. But fascinating show, and as we've modeled our way through to some sort of, I guess, kind of agreement about it. we should maybe leave it there.
Right.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicole. And look forward to the next one.